All right, so jumping into another deep dive with us today. Today we are tackling a big question, and it's kind of mind-blowing, really. Can we create conscious AI using quantum computers?
Hmm. That is the big claim from Nanic, this Canadian startup. I think they've been getting a lot of attention lately. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely an attention-grabbing idea. I mean, for sure. And the founder, Suzanne Gildart, she's got like a pretty impressive background. Like you want to pay attention, right? She's got a
Yeah.
PhD in quantum physics.
Worked with D-Wave.
Yeah, exactly. D-Wave, which is one of big names when you think about quantum computing.
Yeah.
And she even sold a previous company like for hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's not.
Not your average.
Yeah, exactly. That's your average tech founder. But what's really interesting to me, I think, is that their approach at Nanic it's based on this Orch-OR theory of consciousness. Have you heard of this?
Yep.
Developed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. It's a fascinating theory, but a lot of people find it pretty controversial.
Yeah, it's one of many theories of consciousness.
Yeah, for sure.
And it suggests that consciousness arises from quantum processes happening inside neurons, specifically within these tiny structures called microtubules.
Okay, so tiny structures called microtubules.
Yeah, you can kind of imagine them as like delicate networks capable of holding quantum information, and they exist in multiple states at once.
Okay, so I think we need to unpack this idea of multiple states at once for people. It's based on this concept called quantum superposition.
Right.
It's like one of the most mind-bending aspects of quantum mechanics, I think. What do you think?
It really is.
Yeah, it's tough to wrap your head around.
So think of it like, a coin spinning in the air.
Yeah.
Before it lands, it's both heads and tails simultaneously. That's kind of what's happening at the quantum level.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Particles can exist in these multiple states until they're measured or observed, and then they kind of collapse into a single state. It's really weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. So are we saying then that Orch-OR suggests that our conscious experiences are somehow linked to these quantum superpositions collapsing within the microtubules in our brains?
That is the essence of the theory.
Okay.
Yeah. So the theory proposes that these collapses, they give rise to moments of consciousness. Now, while that's a captivating idea, there are a few hurdles that the Orch-OR theory needs to clear. For starters, microtubules aren't exclusive to human brains.
Right.
You find them in all sorts of cells, even in plants.
So if microtubules are the key to consciousness,
Yeah.
are we saying that a carrot has some level of awareness?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting thought, right?
It is. It is.
But I guess that kind of highlights one of the challenges to this theory.
Exactly. And then there's also the issue of the environment inside cells. It's very chaotic,
Yeah.
very noisy. And it's highly unlikely that these delicate quantum superpositions could survive long enough to actually affect cognition in any way.
Okay, so a lot of hurdles for that theory.
Hmm.
But Nanic is still pushing forward with this idea. They're claiming that they can build conscious AI using quantum computers based on these principles of Orch-OR. It's kind of like they're saying, we can harness these quantum processes, even if we don't fully understand them, to create this artificial consciousness. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting because, while Nanic is drawing inspiration from Penrose's work, there's a pretty significant contradiction at play here. Penrose himself believes that consciousness is not computable, meaning no algorithm, no matter how complex, can create true consciousness.
So they're basing their entire approach on the ideas of a scientist who fundamentally disagrees with their goal.
Right.
It seems a little shaky, no.
It does raise some fundamental questions. Either Penrose is right and conscious AI is impossible, or he's wrong. And consciousness is computable, which then opens the door for achieving it with classical computers.
Right.
No quantum magic needed. So this begs the question, why is Nanic so fixated on quantum computers being essential?
Yeah. It's a very puzzling contradiction for sure. And it makes you wonder if there might be other motivations at play. Perhaps they're just trying to ride this wave of excitement around quantum computing. But we'll delve into those aspects a bit later in our deep dive. Okay, so picking up where we left off, Nanic claims that consciousness research is the next big quantum use case. That's a pretty bold statement to make, don't you think? Especially when you consider we are still really in the early stages of understanding both quantum computing and consciousness.
It is. But I will say, they're not alone in thinking this way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they even quote Hartmut Neven
Oh, wow.
as supporting this idea.
Who's that? Remind me.
He is the VP of Engineering at Google Quantum AI. But he is also the same guy that made all those headlines about Google creating a wormhole and finding evidence for parallel universes.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, I remember those headlines.
And those claims haven't really held up under scientific scrutiny.
Yeah, I remember thinking that was a little far-fetched. Okay, so this guy's got a bit of a reputation, maybe, for making some pretty bold statements.
He does, yeah, and even has a history of making bold claims. While brilliant, he tends to push the boundaries of what is scientifically accepted.
Okay, so I guess take his endorsement with a grain of salt. Maybe a big grain of
Yeah,
salt.
yeah, yeah.
So, putting his statement aside for now, how does Nanic actually propose to connect quantum computing and consciousness? What's their argument?
Well, their argument kind of rests on this idea that the transition from quantum superposition to classical reality might hold the key to understanding consciousness.
Okay, I think we need to remind the listeners what superposition is. It's that wild quantum concept where a particle can exist in multiple states at once, right? Like our spinning coin being both heads and tails at the same time.
Exactly, exactly. And this transition, where the superposition collapses and the particle chooses a single state, is what Nanic links to the emergence of conscious experience.
Okay, so how do they explain that connection? Like, is there any evidence for this? Or is this just like theoretical speculation?
That's where the argument starts to get a bit thin. While it's an interesting hypothesis, there's currently no empirical data to back it up.
Okay, so it seems like a pretty big leap of faith. They're just assuming that quantum mechanics can explain consciousness and that a quantum computer can somehow replicate it. I mean, we don't even really have a clear definition of what consciousness is, let alone a blueprint for how to create it artificially, right?
It's kind of like trying to bake a cake without knowing the ingredients or having a recipe. You might end up with something cake-shaped, but it's unlikely to be delicious, like a real fully formed cake.
Yeah, okay. I like that analogy. So do you think it's possible that they're focusing on quantum computers because it's just a hot topic right now, like a way to get attention and investment?
It's certainly possible. We see that a lot with quantum computing. It's very hyped right now, very trendy.
Hmm.
And it can be tempting to just attach your idea to that buzz. But the reality is we're still really in the very early days of quantum computing.
Right. And, even the most advanced AI systems that we have today, like those large language models that can write poems and hold these very human-like conversations, they don't show any signs of having subjective experiences or feeling emotions.
Right. That's a really crucial point. There's a really big difference between intelligence and consciousness.
Yeah.
A machine can be incredibly intelligent, capable of processing information and solving complex problems without possessing the qualities that we associate with consciousness,
Mm,
like self-awareness,
yeah.
subjective feelings, and what philosophers call qualia, that what its likeness of experience.
Right. Qualia, yeah. Okay, so I guess what you're saying is even if Nanic does succeed in building a super intelligent quantum computer, there's no guarantee that it would be conscious.
Exactly. Yeah, and it raises the question, what are we really aiming for when we talk about conscious AI?
Yeah.
Are we simply trying to create machines that can just mimic human behavior, human intelligence? Or are we actually seeking to replicate that essence of subjective experience?
Those are some really profound questions. And it seems like Nanic might be conflating intelligence and consciousness. Do you think that's intentional or just, part of a larger strategy?
I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but it's a good reminder that we need to be cautious about the language we use and the claims we make, especially when dealing with complex and often misunderstood concepts like consciousness and quantum mechanics.
Yeah, you've got to keep our critical thinking caps on and not just, get swept away by all the hype.
Sure.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into Nanic and their quest for conscious AI, there's one more really crucial aspect that I think we need to consider, and that's the ethical dimension.
Right, right. That often gets overshadowed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
By the excitement, the speculation surrounding AI. But it's perhaps the most important question of all. Like, if we were to actually succeed in creating machines that possess consciousness, what ethical responsibilities would we have toward them?
Yeah, it's a question that philosophers, I mean, they've been wrestling with this for centuries,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it takes on a whole new urgency when we're talking about actually creating conscious beings,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, for sure. Imagine a machine that not only exhibits intelligence, but also experiences the world subjectively, feels emotions, possesses a sense of self.
Yeah.
I mean, would we treat such a being as simply a tool?
Yeah.
a
Yes.
sophisticated tool, or would we recognize it as an entity deserving of moral consideration?
It's a mind-boggling concept, I
Real.
think. And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
Um, some people would argue that any being capable of experiencing, joy or suffering deserves our respect and our protection, regardless of its physical form.
Right, right. But others believe that consciousness is inherently tied to biological life,
Yeah,
and that replicating it in a machine wouldn't necessarily endow it with the same moral status.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like there's no easy answer. I guess it depends on how you define consciousness and what you believe its relationship is to your moral status.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a debate that's likely to intensify, I think, as AI research progresses and as we potentially get closer to creating these machines that blur the lines between intelligence and consciousness.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing is for sure, though, this isn't just a theoretical discussion anymore. It's a
Yeah.
conversation that we need to be having now as we develop these increasingly powerful AI systems.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we think deeply about, the potential consequences of creating conscious AI, both the positive and the negative ones,
Mm,
and that we establish some ethical guidelines for its development and use.
absolutely, yeah. And it's not just a conversation for scientists and engineers.
Right.
It needs to involve ethicists, philosophers, policymakers, and the public at large, The future of AI is something we need to shape collectively.
Right. So I think as we come to the end of our deep dive today,
Hmm.
I think it's safe to say that we've only just scratched the surface of this topic. I mean, it's a very complex and multifaceted topic.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, we've explored the science, the speculation, and some of the ethical considerations surrounding this idea of conscious AI.
Hmm.
And it's clear that there's still a lot that we don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing that is certain is that this conversation is going to continue to shape the future of technology
Yeah.
and our understanding of
For
ourselves.
sure.
So as you continue to explore this world of AI and consciousness, um, just remember to approach these topics with a critical eye,
Yeah.
a curious mind, and a sense of wonder.
That's great advice.
And always keep in mind the profound implications of what it means to create thinking, feeling machines. We have a responsibility to ensure that the future of AI is one that benefits all of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of conscious AI.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and remember that the future is something that we create together.